Year 7, so this lesson is going to be on converting fractions to percentages. So, we know quite a lot about fractions. You've done lots of work on fractions, the different types of fractions there are, how to play around with them, how to times them, how to divide them, how to simplify them, how to turn them into mixed numbers. You've done loads on them. What we haven't talked yet about is about percentages. So hopefully you know that percentages, you use this sign here. Okay, so percentages, can you see? That looks a little bit like a fraction, with a number there and a number there and a line in between them. That means there's a very strong relationship between fractions and percentages, and that's what we're going to be learning about today. So, percentages are just very special fractions. Percentages, or percent, per means for every, okay, and cent means 100. Okay, so percent means for every 100. So if I said 10%, that means 10 for every, can't spell there, for every 100. So that means if I say 10% of people like radishes, that means if I got 100 people together, 10 would like radishes. Okay, so it's 10 out of 100. So how can we change then fractions to percentages? So one you probably already know is a half. So I've probably got lots of you screaming at the screen what the answer is as that as a percentage. Percentages, because it's out of 100, the denominator, the bottom number, always has to be 100. So what we're doing here is we're doing equivalent fractions. So we're turning this fraction into something over 100. So what do I do to 2 to turn it into 100? Now you might say I could add 98, but when I'm doing equivalent fractions, I can't add. I have to times or divide. So I'm going to look at what do I times 2 by to turn it into 100. Hopefully we know it's 50. Another way of doing it is saying 100 divided by 2 is what? And then you can go the other way. So I have to times the top by 50. So 1 times 50 is 50. So a half is the same as 50 over 100. So that's the same as 50%. I'll do another one with you. Okay, so I'm going to do another one that hopefully you'll be screaming at the screen saying, I know what this is, a quarter. So again, I want it into a percentage, so I've got to turn it into over 100. So this time, what do I do to 4 to turn it into 100? So how many 4s go into 100? Now you might know this, you might not. You might want to do a little divide sum. Or you might want to say how many 4s go into 1? None. How many 4s go into 10? Well, that's 2 because it's 8, remainder 2. And how many 4s into 20 goes 5. So 4 goes into 100 25 times. So I have to times 4 by 25 to turn it into 100. So I have to do the same to the top. So I have to times that by 25. 1 times 25 is 25. So that's 25 over 100 is the same as 1 over 4, 1 quarter. So 25 over 100 is 25 for every 100. So for every percent per 100 cent. Let's try a slightly harder one then. Let's try 2/5 this time. So again, I need to turn it into over 100. So now I'm saying how many 5s go into 100? This one you might be able to do by counting on your fingers, 5, 10, 15, 20, because counting up in 5s is quite quick. Or we might want to do another little division, or you might know it. How many 5s go into 1? 0. How many 5s go into 10? 2. No remainders. How many 5s go into 0? 0. So it's 20. So if I times 5 by 20, I get 100. So I have to do the same to the top, otherwise they're not equivalent, they're not worth the same amount. 2 times 20 is 40. 40 over 100. 40 for every 100 is 40 for every percent. 100. 40%. Right. Let's try a really tricky one. Okay. I'm going to try a really, really tricky one here. I'm going to try, two types of tricky ones here I could do. I'm going to do a medium tricky one first, and then I'm going to try a tricky one. Okay, so my medium tricky one is, I'm going to say 24 over 40. So I want that to turn into a percentage. So I've got to turn it over 100. I've given you a little clue. I can't do it in one step. Well, I probably could, but bleh, it's easier if I don't. Okay. So there's two ways I could do this. We're going to try one way for this one because it will work nicely, and then for another one we're going to do a different way. Okay. So what do we notice about these two numbers here? We should notice that they're both even. So we can divide the top and the bottom by 2. So half of 24 is 12 and half of 40 is 20. Ooh, does that help me? Oh yes, look, because I can turn 20 into 100. I know that 20 goes into 100, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 goes in 5 times. So I can times the top by 5. 12 times 5 is 60. 60 per 100, 60%. So that was one way. So that's one way with making the fraction smaller by simplifying and then making it bigger. Another way, and I'm going to do it with one that doesn't work quite as nicely as this one. So let's go. How easy do I want it? Let's make it hard. Let's go 17 over 40. Yeah. So that looks like it's going to be tricky to get to 100. What I can do, let's do it this way. I could turn that into 400, couldn't I? Because I could times the top and the bottom by 10. So 17 times 10 is 170. So now what do I do to 400 to turn it into 100? Well, I divide by 4. So now I have to divide 170 by 4. So I'm going to do a short division. How many 4s go into 1? None. How many 4s go into 17? 4, 8, 12, 16. So that's 4, remainder 1. How many 4s go into 10? That's 2 because it's 8, but I've got a remainder 2. So I've got to put a decimal point in and another 0. So I've got to put my decimal point in here. How many 4s into 20? It's 5. So it's 42.5. So that's 42.5%. So you can see that one's tricky. And you can imagine that these numbers down here could get quite tricky. You could have 50 down here. So you turn it into 500 and then divide it by 5. But whatever numbers here, perhaps turn it into a 100 version of itself and then divide by the number in the front. Okay, because that was probably the easiest way to go. So I've just talked to you for about 10 minutes on turning fractions into percentages. So they started out nice and easy. Just turn the bottom number, the denominator, into 100. Then they got a little bit trickier where you might have to do an extra step in. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do now is I'm going to ask you to go back onto Show My Homework, and there is a worksheet which turns fractions into percentages. I want you to complete that for me. So you can either, if you've got a fancy tablet, or you can write on your phones on things, you can either write on it, or if it was me, I'd get my piece of paper and I'd write it on a piece of paper, take a photo, and send a copy of the photo to me so I can see you've done your work. Okay, I will try and send you the answers to the questions on Thursday so you can mark it yourself. I hope you're all well, and I hope you continue to look after yourselves. Bye bye.